Statistics for Environmental Professionals course project for the math course by Emmy German. Below you have the sockeye salmon, also known as king salmon, in the Russian River, which I focused my project on. This is my introduction slide. The topic that I chose to focus on for this project is the number of sockeye salmon that is present in the Russian River during the late run of 2022. The reason why I chose this topic is that I have an interest in fish and how they can impact their community. I recently went to Alaska this past summer in July and learned about how much salmon impacts the community, especially in Juneau. I learned about the 5 different types of salmon species that inhabit Alaska. Learning about these 5 species was very interesting to me, and I just loved the coloring of them. I found it interesting about how long they live with their life cycle, and I also liked being able to taste the different types of the salmon. And seeing how important these 5 species were to the natives made me want to learn more about them. So I decided to start with one species in a specific area. I decided to go with the sockeye salmon, also known as the king salmon, which is the largest and most lucrative salmon in Alaska. My research question is, does the average number of sockeye salmon in the daily fish count within the Russian River during the late run of 2022 exceed the number of 1,337 harvested sockeye salmon within the fisheries? My null hypothesis is the average number of sockeye salmon in the Russian River during the late run is 1,337 fish. And the average number of sockeye salmon in the Russian River during the late run is more than 1,337 fish for my other hypothesis. I got all my data from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, as well as the daily fish updates. They have multiple reports throughout the different months for each season. The data that was retrieved from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game were the specific numbers of sockeye salmon that were caught daily within the Russian River for the 2022 late run. And I got the specific number of 1,337 fish from the report 6 from the fishery update. The data that was collected in each graph and table for each run was used by creating a weir. Essentially, this is a partial dam that was used to raise the water levels upstream. They also tracked the amount of sockeye salmon present by recording the number of fish for each month and the day for each run. The early run starts on June 4th and ends on July 14th, and the late run begins on July 15th and ends on September 8th. Below, I have my graph and descriptive statistics from my overall course project. In my histogram, you will see the average number of sockeye salmon in the Russian River during the late run, as well as the frequency. And the daily count of the sockeye salmon is on the x-axis, and the frequency is the y-axis. For my descriptive statistics, in overviewing the data, I had 56 different points instead of 20, so it made my numbers a little bit larger. The average number of fish were 2,224 sockeye salmon. I had a median of 1,875, a standard deviation of 1,625.5, also with a sample variance of 2,642.407. I had some slight skewness in my graph listed here, with my minimum being 25 and my maximum being 8,199. My confidence interval level was 95%, being at 435.32, with my lower limit being 1,788.9 and my upper limit being 2,659.6. I'm 95% confident that the average mean of sockeye salmon in the Russian River during the late run falls between 1,798.5 and 2,650.0. The results from my hypothesis test, with the null hypothesis, the average number of sockeye salmon in the Russian River during the late run of being 1,337 fish. With my other hypothesis, I had the average number of sockeye salmon in the Russian River during the late run is more than 1,337 fish. According to the data, I would reject my null hypothesis due to there being a sufficient amount of evidence stating that there is 1,000 or more than 1,337 sockeye salmon present in the Russian River during the late run of 2022. You can see this by observing the mean, with the mean amount of fish during the daily count being 2,224. Also below you'll see the p-value and the t-value. In conclusion, you will see my research question as: does the average number of sockeye salmon in the daily fish count within the Russian River during the late run of 2022 exceed the number of 1,337 harvested sockeye salmon in the fisheries? That is my research question. Based on my research question listed above, and after carefully reviewing all the data from the Alaska Fish and Game website and making all the appropriate calculations, there are more than 1,337 sockeye salmon that are present in the Russian River during the late run, which means I had a mean of 2,224 sockeye salmon that were calculated during the daily fish count within the Russian River during the late run of 2022. With that being said, I can reject my null hypothesis because 2,224 fish exceeds the number of 1,337 fish that were harvested in the fisheries. And those are specifically pertaining to sockeye salmon, not the other 4 types of salmon. And this is my references page where I got all my data from, the Alaska Fish and Game website, and also the daily fish update for where I got the 1,337 for harvested sockeye salmon. Thank you.